And now we met Christian Rossi, who is young and ambitious, and known for his ruthlessness. He knows that Claire doesn't have the skill or knowledge to get anywhere in this competition, and he's not one to show mercy to anyone who didn't belong there.
Chapter 4. Tuber urged her forward, out of the tavern and down the street. The warm breeze and quiet outside was a welcome change to the heat, humidity, and overall stench of a tavern full of pirates. "What does he mean, a series of challenges?" she asked. "Am I supposed to take part in these challenges? Is that what he intends?" "It is why he called you here." "I know nothing of sailing," she said, her voice rising disturbingly high, but she was too distressed to calm down. "What do I know of piracy? And am I supposed to compete with these—" "Curs is a good word," Tuber filled in, amusement clear in his voice. Was she some kind of joke in these proceedings, she wondered, a spectacle? "What will these challenges involve?" "Sailing, fighting, I expect." Claire had never even held a weapon, let alone brandished one. Her head ached, and she wanted to stop and rub her temples, but Tuber urged her on. She was getting tense, being shoved around, having no control over what was happening to her. "Where are we going?" she demanded, stopping and digging her heels in. She was not going to move an inch further. "Madame Guerrier's." "Who?" "Is the best place for you to stay, but you're welcome to make your own way if you wish." Claire looked at the dark buildings around her, having no idea where she was, let alone somewhere to go. "Fine," she relented and took a step forwards as Tuber waited for her to move. They walked down a narrow alley, emerging in a small square. It seemed all the walkways around the whole town was built with wooden planks. Tuber kept directing her towards a 3-story house, brightly lit through the windows. "Does my father live here?" "No, love. This is one of the few buildings your father doesn't own. This is the whorehouse." Clara blinked. "The what?" "I'm not a whore, if that's what you're thinking. Not all women are whores, you know." "Perhaps not, but this is where the women are. I would recommend that you stay with the women. You can choose to stay with the men if you wish. Won't go far to confirm what you say about not being a whore if you do, but as I said, you are welcome to make your own way." Shaking with frustration, Clara didn't know what to do. She'd come all this way to not end up in a whorehouse, but the first thing they did was place her in one. Crossing her arms, she tried to consider what to do. One thing was sure, she absolutely did not feel safe with any of the men in the tavern, and doubted a single one of them would show her an ounce of kindness or mercy. Clara looked up at the building in front of them. This was where the women were, Tuber had said, and he thought it best that she stay here. "I'm not a whore," she repeated. "Never said you were, but you don't want to be wandering around the streets on your own here. Madame Guerrier will put you up and keep the men off you, if you wish." "If I wish? Did you not hear a single word I said?" Tuber chuckled. "You're more like your father than you know." "I'm nothing like that man," she stated, still bristling from the arrogance of the man who was supposedly her father, eyeing her up and down like she was a horse, like she needed his approval before he would deign her important enough to give simple consideration to. It wasn't like he was offering her a room in his house, was it? Instead, putting her up in the whorehouse. What kind of degenerate was he? Clara wondered if there was some way she could get back to England quick smart. This had all been a stupid mistake, but there was nothing to be done right now, and she needed sleep. She almost considered requesting her cabin on the ship she had sailed here on, but it was anchored in the dark bay filled with drunken pirates. It was highly unlikely she was safe there now. If she knew her father's protection meant anything, or if she even had it, she would probably have more choices, but their reunion hadn't left her feeling reassured. Tentatively, she took a step forward, reconciling that she would run if this whorehouse was revolting or in any way threatening, into the jungle if she had to. Tuber opened the door and let her in, but Clara was hesitant, even though there was more light inside, chasing the shadows away. Swallowing a lump of dismay, she stepped inside, almost hearing the sisters from the convent in her ear, lamenting that this was where they'd always feared she'd end up. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, and she looked around. The room they had entered was sumptuously decorated with velvet and silk. There was even silk on the walls, light red with small roses printed on it. It really was the most sumptuous room Clara had ever seen, a room she would imagine a princess living in. This was some kind of parlor. There were finely dressed women sitting there, many with necklines too low cut to be decent. In one corner, a girl was giggling in a man's lap. He looked scruffy in these surroundings. "One of the finest whorehouses in the Caribbean," Tuber said proudly, like he was partially responsible for it. "One of the richest, too," a woman said, emerging from a mahogany door to the right. Her green silk dress swayed when she walked over to them. "And who is this?" the woman said, reaching her hand towards one of Clara's curls. "Guilford is hoping you would be of mind to house a guest," Tuber said. The woman's eyebrows rose. "And I'm housing his guests now." She had blue eyes, bright like jewels. Her face was beautiful, but small lines appeared around her eyes suggesting she was a little older. Clara guessed this was Madame Guerrier. Clearly this was not something Madame Guerrier did on a regular basis. From the tone of her voice, Clara had to wonder if this woman liked her father. She got the feeling that perhaps there was a history between the two, judging by the way the woman reacted as if she was imposed upon. "This is his daughter." Madame Guerrier turned her gaze back to Clara with renewed interest. Crossing her arms, she considered Clara, running a forefinger along her own lower lip like she was deep in contemplation. "So this is her. I wondered what happened to her." "Did you know of me?" Clara asked, suddenly interested. "Do you know who my mother is?" Madame Guerrier smiled. "I knew her. A pirate herself. Her name was Anna." Clara's mouth dropped open yet again. "My mother was a pirate?" The woman's statement indicated past tense. "She no longer lives." "No, she does not. Died a long time ago." "I was born, obviously," Clara said, homing in on this unexpected source of information. "Yes, you were. You were here in Tortuga Bay for a while, but then she died. Before you ask how, we should settle you. There isn't much else to say. She died and Guilford sent you away." "Were they married?" "No," Madame Guerrier said, and walked away. Tuber gestured for her to follow by an expression in his eyes, and Clara realized he was leaving her here. "Did they love each other?" she asked as she started up the stairs, leading to the second story of the house. She was now too intent on getting information to worry about where this woman was leading her. Madame Guerrier shrugged. "It is hard to say with a man like Guilford. Then again, your mother was a challenging woman." Clara followed her down a hall, when the woman turned and opened a door. "You can stay here." "I'm not a whore," Clara said, intent on ensuring there had been no misunderstanding. Madame Guerrier smiled. "We're not the despicable creatures you believe us," she said. "Don't forget that you are here, in my house, under my protection, out of the goodness of this whore's heart." Clara felt chided, realizing she had insulted the woman and her profession. "I'm sorry, I just didn't want there to be any misunderstandings." Madame Guerrier narrowed her eyes slightly, then walked past, her head held regally. Clara rubbed her eyes when the woman had left, and stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. The door had no lock, but it was a cheery room with yellow silks on the walls. She certainly hadn't made friends, Clara told herself. From start to finish, this whole venture had been a disaster, but she had a room for the night, and there was a chair she could use to bar the door. Likely she would be safe in here for now, as safe as she was going to get in this town. With a ragged exhale, she walked over to the small window and looked out onto the structures below. Tortuga Bay. How had she ended up here? What was this challenge, and how should she be expected to compete in it? Maybe she should just find a way to return to England as soon as possible, put this entire debacle behind her. Sighing, she sat down on the bed, feeling absolutely despondent. This was not where she belonged. She'd hoped she'd found a place for herself, but this was just outlandish. How could she have been so foolish? Not that there was anything waiting for her back in England.